Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week, um, usually on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But today is a makeup episode slash bonus episode, I suppose. But it's a show I do twice a week normally, uh, where I throw a little chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. Today's episode is one of my favorites. It's from TNG Season 2, Episode 16, Q Who. And it starts off, we are in the engine room with Geordi and a new ensign that we are being introduced to. And she orders a hot chocolate from the replicator, and at the end she says please, to which Geordi makes fun of her for saying that because it's you normally don't say please to a computer. She points out that the computer is sort of like AI. It has a personality to it, and so that's why she treats it sort of like a live being, a human being, or whatever. Uh, she brings the hot chocolate to the workstation where Geordi points out safe to it's not safe to leave it there on the counter in case it spills. And you would think by now they would have solved like waterproofing electronics since we have done that. Excuse me. And I noticed that the hot chocolate is not steaming, so it's not very hot. So as she turns the corner, she runs into Captain Picard and spills the hot chocolate all over Captain Picard. And this is very embarrassing. And again, it doesn't appear to be very hot because Captain Picard's not like, oh, like it's just that he's wet. His uniform has been soiled. And Geordi apologizes for this and um, says that it's entirely his fault, which it's not, but whatever. And Picard says it's okay, I understand. He doesn't say it's okay, but he understands the situation, and he says that he'll just put on a new uniform, which they have replicators, so they and we've seen in Discovery that they can replicate their uniforms. So it shouldn't be a big deal that you've spilled something. It's not like you got to go take it to the laundry. And it's definitely not like you got to put quarters in the laundry machine. So he walks onto the turbo lift and gets to what he thinks is his destination and walks out of the turbo lift, and all of a sudden he's on a shuttlecraft to which Q greets him. And Q has returned for the third time now, and Picard says, "I thought we agreed that you weren't going to interfere with my vessel anymore." And he says, "I assure you that we are nowhere near your vessel." And the camera pans out to the shuttle being out in the middle of space somewhere. And that is our teaser. And then we get the credits. Then we see. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this ensign is introduced as Sonia Gomez. So Geordi and Gomez are in the corridors walking, and he says, "I'm going to take you uh, to tinfoil forward." She says something about being a motor mouth, and about talking too much, and something like that. I think that was before the teaser ended, and I see the DJ Play Nice has arrived. Welcome. And in 10 forward, Guinan is there, and she basically detects something, a presence of some kind, and is walking around looking for this presence, and then eventually calls the bridge and asks Riker if in anything unusual is happening, and he says that there's nothing unusual happening. Then back on the shuttle, Picard is calling the Enterprise, and there's no response. And Q tells him that they're way too far to put the. It's not a. He doesn't call it a homing beacon, but that's what it is. He calls it something else, and I can't remember what it was, but essentially it's a homing beacon, and he says he's too far out for it to matter. Then Geordi sees that Guinan's walking around, looking around, and asks if everything's all right. And then we see Troy walk onto the bridge and asks if where Picard is, and Riker asks the computer where. He initially says he's in his quarters. Then he asks the computer where he is, and the computer says he's not on board. And then Worf notices that a shuttle is missing. So they assume that Picard is on that shuttle, but they don't know how he got on it and left without them knowing about it. And Riker orders an all stop. And then Worf hails the shuttle, but there's no response. So Riker orders tells Worf to do a maximum. Good Lord, I can't speak. Scan, and tells Data to do come up with a search pattern that Wesley will, because Wesley's an acting ensign right now. Well, that Wesley will implement. Then we see. Then we get a first officer's log from Riker, who basically says that they don't know what's going on, and they have been searching for 6 hours for Picard. Then we see back on the shuttle, Q is bouncing a ball, while Picard sits there silently. DJ Play Nice is distracting me, but I'll read what you said once we get through the review. Then Q basically says we can be here forever, but I can live forever, but you don't. And he's telling, and Picard, so Picard demands to take him back to his ship, and he says, if I take you back to your ship, will you consider my request? And he says yes, so that Q snaps him back in there on 10 forward. Then Worf says to Riker that the shuttle has reappeared and Picard is now in 10 forward, and Riker smiles, presumably because he now knows that this is Q. So Guinan says that I knew it was you, and they face off, and of course, if you've seen the episode, they're kind of like this, like they're about to do some force lightning or something, and Q calls her an imp, and Guinan knew Q from like 200 years prior. They had met, and then Riker and Worf enter the 10 forward. Q's proposal is that he wants to join the crew because he's become homeless, and Um, right, Guinan rightfully in her, you know, Guinan does say that not all Q are like him. Q was asked to leave the Continue, and he says that he will help out any way that he can, and will renounce his powers if they'd like that. And Picard says no, that they don't really need him, uh, and that he doesn't trust him. And Q says to Guinan that they're moving faster than expected, and Q argues that they do need him. And at some point, there's a Riker points out that the first time that they encountered him, he put all of humanity on trial, and Q says, "Well, you were not acquitted, but or not even now. Just they didn't find them guilty." And then the second time, he asked Riker to join the Continuum, and Riker refused. And basically, they don't trust Q at all. So Picard says no. I refuse your request. And Q gets angry and flings the Enterprise away into space, further into space, 7,000 light years. And Picard asks Data how long it would take to get back to the nearest star base, and he says basically it's over 2 years. And Riker asks why he would do such a thing, and Q says, consider it a preview of things to come. And then Picard asks Guinan about this region of space, because her people had been in this region of space. And she says, if I were you, I would start back now. Despite her warning, Picard wants to investigate further. And they come across a planetary system with an M-class planet where all machine elements have been stripped from the planet. And Data mentions that it reminds him of the encounter that they had in the neutral zone, which was the end of season 1, titled Neutral Zone, where they find the people that were in cryo sleep and brought back to life. And the one guy that barges on the bridge who wants to know about his finances and stuff like that. Which I actually like that episode. I think it's great. I think it's a great episode. Some people shit on it. But clearly they were setting up something there, and then didn't get around to it. Should have been, well, that was this also, isn't that the same episode? No, never mind. I'm conflating two different things. But anyway, that's a great episode. Go watch it. So then we see the Borg cube, and it begins probing the Enterprise, and the Enterprise detects no life signs on aboard the cube. Picard hails them to no response. Then he tells Guinan to activate her view screen, which is confusing because Guinan is in 10 forward and looking out the window. It has a physical window, and you can see the Borg cube outside of the window. So why would she need to activate her view screen? I don't understand that. But I would love to go to a convention and ask or talk to one of the writers or something. Well, the writer of this episode is dead, Maurice Hurley. Michelle Fairy Tales has arrived. Hello. So he's dead, so I can't ask him. But I'd like to know why that is. Why did they show the Borg cube outside the window of? So if anybody ever goes to a convention, ask this question. And and you have to say it like a nerdy in a nerdy voice. In episode 16 of season 2, Q Who, why was Guinan asked to turn on their view screen when there's clearly a Borg cube outside the window that she can see? All right, that's my. And then of course, it's just a TV show. Uh, Guinan says that the Borg encountered um, that her species encountered the Borg 100 years prior and basically wiped them out and spread their species all across the almost entirely wiped them out and spread their species all across the galaxy. Then we see a Borg in engineering, and Geordi calls Worf or security to engineering, and they get down there, and Picard's with them, and Geordi says that the drone had been doing a visual survey of the engine room. Then we see Q reappear and basically taunting Picard. Picard approaches the Borg drone, and Q says that he's just a scout, one of many and he's only here to analyze the ship and maybe eventually take over the ship. And so Picard orders Worf to do something about this, and because the drone enters the little tentacle things into the computer and is scanning the computer, and so Worf sends over a security guard, and the security guard is quickly thrown to the ground. Then they shoot a phaser at it, and it's killed. And another Borg drone shows up, and the Borg drone starts doing the same thing. Then he grabs a couple of parts from the dead drone and takes them and beams away. And then the dead drone just sort of disappears, and we see an outline of where his body was laying. And then Picard holds another conference where Guinan is telling about how her people were basically wiped out. Then they're being hailed, and we see the drawer, the interior of the cube, and it basically says, if you defend yourselves, you will be punished. They explain that their weapons are inferior to the Borg. Then Deanna, who is actually useful in this episode, says that it is more like a hive mind. They don't have a single leader. Obviously, this was retconned later on in First Contact, where they have the Borg Queen. So I came up with they meant she wasn't single at the time, guys. She had a dude that she was hooking up with, and that's why she wanted Picard, right? Because she had broken up with that guy, and she wanted Picard, so she wasn't a single leader. That's my headcanon, so to speak. Then Q shows up again and taunts Picard once again. Then Worf says that there's some, not a some sort of, a some form of tractor beam. Just say there's a tractor beam. I mean, how hard is that? There's a tractor beam. I don't know what kind it is, but it's a tractor beam. And it's draining their shields. And so they fire on the Borg cube, and it doesn't really damage them. Then we get a type of laser beam. Again, just say a laser beam. You don't have to say a type of laser beam. It's a laser beam. And it slices a big circle on the saucer section and pulls that out. That section of the saucer section. And pulls it out. And because I need a thesaurus. Okay? I don't have one. So I said section twice in the same sentence. Sue me. They finally destroy the tractor beam, and they find out that 18 people had been killed in that section. Then we see in engineering, and this is the incoming rant. Remember last time I said I can't have a show without a rant? I didn't plan this. It just came up in this episode because, and I'll tell you why. They're in engineering, and Gomez is kind of freaking out that 18 people had died, and Geordi says to her, the time to grieve is later. Right now, let's get these shields back up. What would happen, and what have we witnessed in Kurtzman Trek? Something like that would happen, and they would have to talk about their feelings about it, and sometimes cry about it, and they would. There's a particular episode of Starfleet Academy where a Vulcan sacrifices himself, or no, a security guy sacrifices himself to save the rest of the crew, and the Vulcan guy, the human guy, the main guy, I forget his name, Caleb, is it Caleb? The black dude. Turns to the Vulcan guy and says, why would he do that? And the Vulcan guy basically says a version of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Basically, they have no concept, in the writers have no concept of heroism, no concept of like sacrificing for others or for the greater good. So we see in TNG and other non-Kurtzman Trek, that Geordi in this instance is acting cool, collected, and calm. They're not stopping to talk about their feelings and how, oh, I loved that guy that was on deck 2. He always brought me coffee in the morning, and I just miss him, and he's dead, and they're not. We constantly see that in Kurtzman's Trek, where they stop and they talk about their feelings, or they have a conversation in the middle of a shootout, instead of just showing a shootout, which in Enterprise, in Broken Bow, the episode I reviewed last week, there's shootouts and stuff, and they didn't stop and like make quippy jokes and say I don't know, whatever, quippy jokes, and, oh, is that how your mom shoots, or something like that. They just show the action piece, and then we have a discussion later or whatever. So, and you see that with Kirk, there's professionalism. Uh, with Geordi, this is an instance of professionalism that we have a task at hand. Later, we can talk. We can have the funeral and talk about how we felt about that guy that brought me coffee every morning. It's just it's a more mature. And you wouldn't do that in the military. Like in real life military, you wouldn't do that. Now, some people maybe like Marines, maybe they do, uh, but the way we're supposed to be portraying this show is a military, a quasi military. Starfleet is a quasi military outfit, and you're supposed to show maturity of humanity, and you just don't do that anyway. I didn't think of any of that until I saw that scene, which is why I was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna have a side rant in this episode. I'm gonna have to, because I gotta point that out. This is a perfect example of the difference between old Star Trek and new Star Kurtzman Trek. Anyway, and they don't buckle under pressure. They don't succumb to emotional outbursts. Anyway, uh, so Guinan is describing the Borg to Picard, and oh, Admiral Teague is in the chat. Hello, Admiral Teague. I was just explaining the difference between Kurtzman Trek and the Trek that we love. About how they don't stop in the middle of a crisis to talk about their feelings. They do the task at hand, and then later on talk about it. Uh, Q butts in and says that they're not interested in political conquests. They just want technology. They're describing how basically they don't care about anything else. They just want your technology. Uh, Riker butts in and says there were 18 people on that we lost, and Picard kind of slows down and says, tell us that this is just one of your illusions, and he says no. Then Geordi calls in and says that they've restored power to the shields. Then Worf calls in and says, I have the casualty list coming in on screen, and Picard says, cancel that again. We'll deal with that later. Again, professionalism. We don't have time to cry about our feelings and stuff like that, and talk about the guy that brings me coffee in the morning every day, every morning. We'll deal with that later. Again, professionalism. Riker suggests visiting the Borg ship so that we know they can understand more about the Borg, which I think is a good idea but very dangerous. And Guinan warns against it, but again, that they paid us a visit. It's only we should pay them a visit in kind. So Picard orders a small away team of Data, Worf, and Riker. They are. Picard does a log saying that he believes that they have neutralized the Borg cube for the time being. So they beam over, and we see the regeneration chambers, which they haven't called it that, but they are little slots where they regenerate. They initially pull out phasers, and then they see that these Borg are not reacting to them, and then there's tons of Borg everywhere. and Riker's wondering why their initial reports were that sensors said that there was no life signs when there's plenty of life signs, and Data, almost said Yoda. Data, it looks nothing like Yoda. Uh, Data suspects that the computer was scanning for individual life forms instead of a collective of life forms. So then Data steps into one of the slots and says that the technology is beyond ours. And we see a drone walk past and doesn't interact with them. Then the camera pans back and we see how big the ship actually is, the interior of the ship. And then they come around the corner to the maturation chambers. I can't believe I was able to say that, pull that off. Again, that's not what they're called here. Riker says it's a Borg nursery, but we later find out that that's what they're called, maturation chambers, where we see the Borg babies. And then that immediately made me think of the Muppet Babies and how I know, don't give them any ideas. I know. I'm usually the one that says this in the chat. Don't give them any ideas. But I could see Kurtzman, because they like to throw anything at the wall to see what sticks, is they had like a cartoon, sort of like the Muppet Babies, but it's Borg babies. And they go on little adventures, assimilating people and stuff. That's where my brain went. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I didn't want it to go there, but it went there. Riker says that what oh yeah, Admiralty reminds me that they are going to do a Muppet episode of Strange New Worlds. That's correct. I forgot about that. I hope that Kurtzman is not watching this. He probably isn't. I'm 99% sure he's not. So hopefully that idea stays amongst us. Don't tell anybody. Riker says that they have AI directly into our brain, which Elon Musk is currently doing that right now. And I've always maintained that if you wanted to do a Borg origin story, have some like an Elon Musk or Steve Jobs like character that basically creates a cult of people that want to be cyborgs, and then that cult grows a following to the point to where, like, kind of like during COVID, like, if you refuse to become a cyborg, you're going to be shamed, and you're going to be ridiculed, and you're going to, you know, basically drummed out of society. So then eventually the whole entire society becomes cyborgs, and then eventually they lose their own individuality, and then that's how the Borg, starts. And then they go out and assimilate other civilizations. That's been my idea for the longest time. You have like an Elon Musk type person, and like I said, we already have him trying to do shit like that, and I do not want anything to do with it. It's okay to have like if you get like a Luke Skywalker type situation where you get your hand cut off, you have a robotic hand. That's one thing. Or to have a pacemaker, but to have it like integrated with your brain, and no way. So they find out that the Borg are collectively repairing the ship, and Picard says, "Let's get the hell out of here." And so they go to Warp 8. Get out of Dodge is what I wrote down. But the Borg are in pursuit. So Picard tells them to go to maximum, tells Geordi to go to maximum warp. So they go to warp 9, and they're still in pursuit. And they fire torpedoes at the cube, and it doesn't do any damage. Then they go to 9.65. Q returns again and is taunting Picard some more. The Borg are still chasing them. Then the Borg fire a weapon at them, and it doesn't do any damage physically, other than it's designed to drain the shields. So their shields go down to 41%, and if they get hit again, they'll be without shields. So they fire torpedoes again. Once again, nothing happens. Q says that they are relentless. They're not going to stop. They're going to keep coming until they get you. Then they get hit again, and the shields go down, and the warp engines go down. Picard says to Q, end this. And Q says, what makes you think that I could do anything about this? And he tells him, Picard says to him, you wanted me to say that I need you? I need you. So Q stops it and returns them back to the spot that they started off. And he makes a speech to Captain Picard. And I didn't write down the whole entire speech, but I wrote what I thought is the most pertinent part. He says to Picard, if you can't take a little bloody nose, maybe you ought to go back home and crawl under your bed. Basically saying, you're going to encounter things out here in space that you're not going to be prepared for. And that was the other thing, is Picard does say that you wanted us to say that we're unprepared. We're unprepared. We're not prepared currently. You wanted to frighten us. We're scared. You mission accomplished. You've done it. You have scared us, and now we have to think about what we just encountered. And at the end of the episode, Picard is playing chess, 3D chess with Guinan, and Picard says, maybe Q did the right thing for the wrong reasons, and Guinan's confused about that, and he says that, we need to be more prepared and not be so complacent. It's not safe here. Yeah, Admiral Teague finishes the rest. Yeah, it's not safe here. And so that's the episode, and I gave it. This is, guys, 10 out of 10. No. The only question I have is, why does Guinan need to turn on her view screen when there's a Borg cube outside the window? That's the only question I have about this. But I'm not going to take off points for that, because maybe they were just trying to convey that to the audience. Maybe she can't see it out the window, but it clearly is out the window, and that is a physical window in 10 Forward. The whole point of 10 Forward is that you can look out the window and see the stars. I liked Q. I love Q. I love. I even liked Picard season 2. Some of the stuff was good. It's a shit season overall, but there's some good stuff with Q in there. Although they wasted an opportunity to kind of talk about that rival between Guinan and Q. You had both of them on the season, and then you didn't even resolve that. So what the hell? I liked that they show that Picard is vulnerable and show just how dangerous the Borg are. Now, obviously, they nerfed him later on, and of course, the Borg Queen. They introduced the Borg Queen when they said it wasn't a single. There was no single leadership, which I made the joke that she wasn't single at the time. She was shacked up with some dude. Um, she broke up with him and wanted to hook up with Picard. So yeah, 10 out of 10. No notes. Great episode. Great introduction of a future villain, and a good Q episode, or lack of Q episode. All right, I'm gonna see what if there's any comments. Michelle Fairy Tales says that she believes this won 2 Emmys. It deserved it. It earned it. I mean, and then I got the comment about the Muppet episode. And Admiral Teague says, "Oh, once you were exposed to Kurtzman, he's so simple that he lives there forever, just off the wind power in your brain. You can forecast him easy." Yeah, that's a funny comment. I guess DJ Plinus had to head out. One is, Admiral Teague says, one is Star Trek, one is not. Yes. It's pretend Trek. Uh, Strange New Worlds did some good episodes, but then that last season was just. They shitted on Roddenberry. They shitted on Shatner. It just went downhill really fast, and I tried to give it the good old college try, and I even did reviews on this channel, and I eventually was just like, I'm not messing with this, and I don't know if I'm going to watch the next season, the Muppet season. I vowed that I wasn't, but sometimes you do it for the franchise. I don't know. I'll make up my mind when it gets there. I watched 2 episodes of Spider Noir, and so far so good. But I don't want to be spoiled, and I think there's already mixed bag thoughts out there. I don't know. All right, portion of the night where fate chooses the next episode. Now, I had forgotten which episode because I went on Twitter today and actually used it for the first time in a long time, and I had forgotten. I wanted to tell the people out there in Twitterverse what episode I was reviewing, and I had forgotten which one I was going to review. So I looked on the random generator thing, and when I did, I accidentally pressed the randomize again button. So it ended up on Picard, which I've already stated from the get-go I'm not doing Kurtzman Trek anyway. So we're going to randomize again. Voyager, Season 1, Episode 6, The Cloud. I think I'm familiar with this one, and I don't think that I've reviewed it. But I'm going to look into my little black book where I write all the episodes that I've reviewed down. No girls' phone numbers. What was it? Season 1, Episode 6. No, I've only done Caretaker for Season 1. That's odd. So I will be back tomorrow with a bonus episode because I have the for the first time since spring, I have a weekend, an actual weekend off. So I have time. So I'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to review Voyager Season 1, Episode 6, The Cloud, and then I'll tell you what's happening next week because my schedule is is screwed up again. Uh, and Admiral Teague says, "Great stream." Well, thank you. Thanks for stopping by. Thank DJ Play Nice, who apparently has already left, and Michelle Fairy Tales and Admiral Teague for stopping by. Admiral Teague, I will see you in the chat later on tonight on your show. Uh, Admiral Teague should be, unless he's not doing a show, but I suspect he is tonight at what 10, 9? I don't know, but I'll be there, and I'll probably send in a super chat or two. Uh, so I want to thank everyone for showing up. In the lurkers, there are people. I do get more views after I do reviews. That rhymed. Uh, so the people that are out there that are viewing this later on, please stop by the live and leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you thought about either my review or the episode that I'm reviewing. Please feel free. Don't be shy. I'm not gonna get mad if you don't like it or whatever. You can call me an asshole. You can call me whatever you want. I've been called worse. But anyway, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for coming by.